to be really a conscious fashion consumer, you have to be very altruistic, and you have to be able to think beyond your wardrobe and your daily life. You need to be able to think of the cotton farmers, of the garment workers, of the people living near polluted rivers. I'm Christina, and I'm the founder of Redress, and we're an NGO reducing pollution and waste in the fashion industry. And probably my ultimate mission is just to inspire people to kind of get active with being part of a solution. The original problem we were trying to address is the rampant pollution coming from the fashion and textile industry, and we're still trying to do that. But ultimately, I think after 9 or 10 years of experience in this sector, what we're really trying to do is question humans' relationship with consumption, and trying to awaken people's minds to better ways of consuming and using and disposing. Well, honestly, the industry is facing way too many problems for me to be able to isolate it. Firstly, taking a whole look at the entire fashion and textile industry, it's the second biggest global polluter. And so if you want to look at pollution, you're going to have to address water, chemicals, carbon, greenhouse gases, the whole spectrum of pollution, and it's all coming out of the fashion and textile industry. Of course, if you wanted to isolate the absolute worst of the worst, I think you could possibly isolate water. The textile industry causes about 20% of all industrial water pollution, and in China, the textile industry is probably the second biggest water polluter in China. And you've got to think, obviously China's got a huge industry across multiple sectors. So, I mean, even if you look at China, if you look at the pollution coming from the textile industry in China, the textile industry is actually causing twice the amount of pollution for water than the coal industry. And China's coal industry is actually supplying around 50% of the world's coal. So I mean, that's just looking at that's just looking at water as being one major problem with the textile industry. When you start looking at because there's also chemicals. You need 8,000 chemicals to turn a raw material into a fabric. 8,000 different chemicals. One pair of jeans requires 3 kilos of chemicals. And when you just multiply that by the amount of clothes that are being produced out there, it's truly horrific. Well, I think if consumers keep going with buying, and dumping, then we're not going to address the problems of the fashion industry, which will mean that the fashion industry will continue to speed up. It'll produce more and more clothes, and it will create a lot of pollution and waste along the supply chain. And we will be continuously facing a huge amount of wastage going into landfill. So what is that going to do? It's going to continue to damage the environment, polluting the planet and killing people. I think, from talking to a lot of people in the industry, that the biggest threat, if you could look, the industry is facing almost every single challenge that you could possibly think of. But if you really wanted to nail it down to something, what the industry really needs is a reliable, sustainable, renewable, cheap source of new fibers. Because cotton is a minefield of problems, and recycled polyester is wonderful. I mean, we've got a whole spectrum of materials and fibers that you're feeding into the textile industry, and the search is on for the miracle fiber that you can feed this monster with less of an impact. And that is what fashion brands need, because they know that most textile, garment, fashion businesses know that they can't source the way that they did before, because there's competition for food, for land to grow food versus fibers. You've got underpriced resources like water. You've got consumer awareness that has spiked in recent years, and you've got a changing consumer sentiment. So basically, sourcing has to change. Well, the reason that we focus on waste reduction is because it's so obviously an environmental benefit to reduce waste, and it's also an economic benefit for anyone wanting to improve their bottom line. Reduce waste, I mean, come on, it's obvious. So that's why we want to reduce waste, because we think that we can demonstrate impact that way. If you want to reduce waste and you want to go and talk to a brand and you want to talk to a supplier, the door's open, because everyone loves reducing waste. So that's why we do that. Why we are not trying to find the miracle new fibre is because honestly the solutions probably for that will come from technology, and we are not well, you know, I can barely operate Facebook. So, you know, we're not going to be going down that route. We are an educational organisation, essentially a social enterprise driven by education. So in order to do that, we have to make money. The ways that we make money are entrepreneurial at their very spirit, but completely varied according to where we're digging for cash. If we're looking in the supply chain, or if we're looking for cash from consumers and funding. So we don't have one funding model that actually serves us, because we're not actually selling a product or making a product. Instead, we're basically incredibly creative about getting money out of people and companies and organizations and governments. So another model that we're working on, and it's a business model, although I'd like to be richer on it, the model is we take clothes from people who do, the business model is that we get clothes donated to us and then we sell them. It's pretty easy, but we could collect, say, in a year on year is different, let's just say 20 tons in a year, 15, 20 tons in a year, but we can probably only sell around 3% of that through our pop-up shops. So it's a good funding mechanism. It doesn't really kind of touch the sides of the budget, but it does help a little bit. And of course, it's not, when you run a social business or a social enterprise, it's not about the money. Yes, you've got to grow, you've got to make money, but you also have to change people. So you can't always value things by the dollar. It's not easy to convert a fashion consumer. It's really difficult because, you know, if you look at organic food, it's obvious, right? People are selfish, they want the best for themselves. So if you eat organic, you're going to be healthier, hopefully. But people, to be really a conscious fashion consumer, you have to be very altruistic, and you have to be able to think beyond your wardrobe and your daily life. You need to be able to think of the cotton farmers, of the garment workers, of the people living near polluted rivers. And so to do that, it requires an emotional kick up the you-know-what. And you can't do that in 1 second. It takes a while to really inform someone like that, inform someone to be able to change. And you have to. The problem with fashion as well is that it's so deeply emotive. You know, what we wear is so important, and so to ask people to really make big changes over the outer appearance of their clothing is actually to ask quite a lot. The way to convert people is to make them understand that, number one, the fashion industry is so polluting, and it's not just causing problems to the environment, dirty rivers, it is literally killing people. That's number one. And of course, you know, there's a huge amount of social issues that come with our clothes. And if you can lodge those two things into people's mind, and thirdly, nail it home by saying every time you buy something, you're actually part of that, because you're buying that, you're paying for all that suffering. And if that's what you want to do, well, no one actually wants to do that. That's the good thing, because I do think that most people are great, and they truly don't want to be part of that. They just don't understand that it's that bad. So the way to change them is that you've got to make them realize that they're part of it. It's changing people, and we've changed so many people, because people who come to our pop-up shops are on the hunt for a deal. They are not kind of green. They don't have a halo shining as they walk through the door. They're looking for clothes. They want nice clothes, and they become very inspired that you can actually get great second-hand clothes. And so we do convert people whilst they're in our stores. Now, I think it's a carrot and a stick. I think you have to paint the harsher reality of the truth, and that is, you know, the stick. The carrot comes in the form of saying, what fundamentally is fashion? It's the most beautiful, creative expression of who you are as a human spirit. And if we can capture that positive thread of fashion and make it ethical, make it value the planet, then you can actually love dressing in a more sustainable, ethical way. In fact, when you become more in tune with the fashion industry and you dress more ethically, I've discovered is that you actually start to enjoy style so much more, because it has meaning. I would love to say that our message resonates with millennials, because, you know, that's such a powerful group of people, but I actually think that we're talking much more to the more sort of older group of 25 to 45-ish, more women than men. We're talking a lot, I think, to people who are searching for something else in their life. At the end of the day, we're just 10 people. We have a huge mission, we're 10 people, and we are up against one of the biggest industries in the world, which actually, if you look at the fashion and textile industry, it's the second biggest economic trade. So are we going to be able to dent that industry if we work alone? Of course not. you have to work with industry to change industry. So one example of one brand that we have been helping is Shanghai Tang, obviously China's leading luxury brand. We partnered with them for a couple of years on one of our projects, which is the Sustainable Fashion Design Competition. Basically, competition, we find the winner goes to work with Shanghai Tang, designs a collection, and the collection is made using upcycled fabric waste. It's all of the fabric inventory and excess that's lying around from previous collections from Shanghai Tang's business, and with our designers who we've trained, we've targeted, we've found them, they create a collection for global retail. Now, why that is great, on the one hand, you're educating emerging designers, you're transforming the ethos amongst emerging designers, but then we flip over and we affect the business. So we are looking at transforming supply chains of some big fashion brands in order to put upcycled products into their store, ultimately because we want consumers to buy more sustainable options. Shanghai Tang's reason for getting involved with us is because I think, number one, they are a very responsible company who actually like doing good through their business. But much more than that, they see the opportunity of working with our designers who are, you know, Central St. Martin's, standard, incredible designers, as reinvigorating the brand with a much edgier collection, actually, that's just in store, and also integrating sustainability into their collections. So a refresh invigoration is probably one of the unexpected benefits that we also give to these brands. Timing's everything. Okay. Yeah, timing and connections is actually very important. You know, we've had a very big partnership with Esprit that went on for 4 years, big global rollouts of very mass mainstream fashion collections. People chop and change. These big fashion companies, their CEOs change every day, it feels like, and you can't actually make a long. It took about 20 minutes over lunch. Well, I went out. He's the chairman, not executive director, right? Chairman now. I went out with the chairman, Raphael Leman. He's a friend of a friend. Sat down for lunch and said, "Do you want to partner with us on a sustainable fashion design competition?" And he'd said yes before I'd really finished the sentence. And that's because, you know, what I find, and we speak a lot to fashion brands, is that I don't think fashion brands are like, you know, the evil people in the world. I don't think so at all. It's about catching them at the right time, getting in there with the right people and selling them the right message. So the benefit for us of working with, say, for example, Shanghai Tang is immense, because through them we're able to message that China's taking sustainability more importantly, and that upcycling is a business solution. And that is important. Through working with a company like Esprit for a number of years, we're actually able to say, look, Esprit, one of the biggest players out there in the more mainstream industry, is looking at waste reduction in their supply chain. And that actually pushes a lot of agenda across the industry. And of course, reaching consumers as well. I actually think, I know this might sound really unstrategic, but the end game keeps moving. You know, we need to be going and doing the hardest work possible. So there's no end to this. The fashion industry is always going to be disgusting. It is. I mean, you know, who are we kidding? It's always going to be a massive, massive problems. And yes, we can try and do our best to make just some of it better. But I'll go to my grave and it will still be really bad. So the end game is to evolve with the needs of the industry, and that has already changed in the last 10 years. Like 10 years ago, we started collecting clothes and selling clothes, trying to inspire people that secondhand clothes were okay. Now everyone's doing it. The market is crowded with entrepreneurs, startups, for-profits. Everyone's collecting clothes. You're barely lucky to leave this office with your shoes on. Everyone wants your old clothes and everyone's flogging clothes. So there's not a gap in the market for us anymore, but that's fine, we're still doing it, but we need to move to where it's harder. One example of that is, for example, we provide teaching materials to universities, because universities around the world really realize that they need to teach their fashion design students sustainability, but most unis are way too busy to even think about it. So we've created a teaching module that all they need to do is download it and teach it. And I like to say any monkey could do it, because it's, you know, there's your pack, read it out, teach the students. Now, why did we do that? Because we're addressing a gap in the market. The gap is that there's a huge need to educate young designers. The universities don't quite know how to do it. We're there in the middle, and that is what a successful social business does. It goes to where there is a gap. There's no point hanging around the gap if it's filled up. Yeah. It's very difficult and actually quite soul destroying if you run a social business or enterprise, because you can have a success every day, but the challenge is still so big. So I'm very proud of a lot of our successes, and even yesterday I felt really happy about a couple of things, which is quite rare. Because really, if you're pretty driven with your cause, the cause remains this monkey on your back and this monster. And so, yeah, small successes along the way, but the challenge is still so big. There's no point in patting yourself on the back that much, really. Sustainability, no, our current challenges are actually strategic, manpower, internal systems, efficiency, management. And funding, always funding. Funding is just always there. That's taken for granted. Yeah.
So how do you overcome these challenges? Like, is it you against the world? Do you have a board that helps you?
Yeah.
Do you talk to other entrepreneurs? Like, is it wine?
No, I think so. I started it almost 10 years ago, and I've been winging it for all of this time. But now, as we're growing into a big organisation, we can't just wing it. And so about a year ago-ish, we set up a new board, and we've got a much tighter team structure with a new executive director who's reporting to the board. So what we're trying to do is move beyond a founder into a proper setup of a business with an active board, which we do. We have that now. The problem, of course, with anything is that things take time. You can't just set up a board and then expect it all to work the next day, and you can't just employ an ED, an executive director, and expect that to just happen overnight. And so we're in a deep transition stage of moving beyond the sort of passionate founder to a sort of top management board structure. It's not that difficult. It just takes time. And it's like you've just got to keep working at it, and you can't ever really expect it to just happen. It constantly needs attention. Yeah. Well, a few years ago, it must have been 6 years ago, I went to INSEAD in Singapore, and I learned so many things, but the one thing I learned was that the founder can ultimately kill the growth of an NGO, and that really stuck with me as my abiding lesson from that entire INSEAD course, and it was on social entrepreneurship. And so I'm very conscious of being a founder and enabling the team to take it on. Personally, I can't separate my life from Redress because I love it.
Right.
But I think I can walk away, because I'm not really walking away. I'm just walking away to other opportunities. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
What happened?
Well, you know what? Sometimes you can be working on a project, slogging your guts out, and it's so demanding. Plus, I've got 3 young children, so I work really, really hard, and yeah. It's just soul destroying sometimes. You've got to.
How do you pick yourself up?
I think you got to. I mean, it's easy to pick yourself up because when you've been doing it for so long, it's your second nature. You're not going to give up. Anyway, it depends on your character. I'm not someone who gives up anyway. But yes, it's not fun. Anyone who says it's fun is definitely lying. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's hard work. Yeah. I think another thing I've learned is just how long everything takes. Back in the early days, I was talking to someone from Ashoka when I was setting this organisation up, and he said, oh, you've got to take a 10-year view on it. And I thought, that's ridiculous. I'll be done with this within a couple of years. And 10 years on, I've barely scratched the surface. And I think a lot of people who are starting up don't realise, A, that they're going to work themselves so hard for so long before you even see impact. And even when you start to see impact, you haven't really scratched the surface. So persistence and utter sheer determination. Otherwise, I don't think there's any point starting.